1. I'm a 56-year-old male in the UK, was working in Africa as an operations manager for a large global security company from 2009 to 2014. The country I was working in had been through a long civil war and was very underdeveloped. Think no paved roads, people living a very traditional African lifestyle. At the time, I had been working there on 10 weeks in the country. 2 weeks at home rotation for about 4 years. I'd thrown to and from work so often that I had the journey down to the bare minimum travel time, and it worked out the cheapest option for the company because travel days were paid from when I left home. The shorter my journey, the cheaper it worked out for the company. Someone in the head office had looked at cutting down on travel costs, probably to make themselves look good and get promoted. As a result, I got an email after a week at home saying they had changed my normal flight, which was 5 p.m. on Sunday, from my nearest UK airport via Amsterdam, then on to Nairobi, connecting with a 9 a.m. flight to the war-torn country on Monday morning. The change was from a 5 p.m. departure to a 5 a.m. departure the same day. Same route, saving about £80. To clarify, the 9 a.m. flight from Nairobi was the first flight to a war-torn country because the destination airport was the only surfaced runway in the country. It had no runway lights or radar, so all flights had to be in daylight. Anyway, I agreed to the flight time change, but they had to move it to Monday so I don't lose a day at home. All will become clear. They agreed because they still saved £80 on the ticket. No skin off their nose. Once I got the flight confirmation, I contacted the travel desk asking for hotel and taxi bookings. When they asked why I needed these, I explained that to make a 5 a.m. departure required a check-in at 3 a.m., so I needed a hotel at the airport on Sunday night because no trains were running to get me the 3 hours to the airport from home for that time in the morning. The flights they booked would get me into Nairobi for 7 p.m. after dark, so I'd need a hotel there and a taxi each way to and from the hotel to get me onto the 9 a.m. flight on Tuesday. The same flight I would have been on if I'd left at 5 p.m. but a day after. A couple of days go by, and I got a phone call from the company travel desk telling me the travel plan was confirmed. I was on the 5 a.m. flight with a hotel reservation at my UK airport the night before, a hotel in Nairobi after landing, and the taxi would collect me in Nairobi and drop me off at the airport for my final connection. I asked about the cost of living. They said £80. I then asked about the hotels and taxis. They replied, oh, they don't come out of our budget. That's the operations budget, so you're fine. I was happy. I was arriving back at work a day later, still paid the same amount with a night out in Nairobi to sweeten the deal. My boss, on the other hand, went nuts. Nobody had told him of the changes. My deputy flew out on the plane I flew in on, meaning I didn't get a handover of the work that was going on. On top of that, the cost for hotels, taxis, and extra days' pay had all come out of my boss's operational budget. I think the total amount added was almost £1,000. But hey, they save £80 on the flight cost. 2. This situation took place years ago at the house I rented with my then preschoolers. I was extremely fortunate to rent a house where the rent was very reasonable and I had an amazing landlord. The owner of the house next door was an older, very cantankerous and rude woman, and her totally obnoxious son, who also hit on me, that's another story. They had an older, very sweet and gentle dog, Tim. Tim was frequently allowed to wander free, busy road no less, and he was an almost daily visitor to our home because he loved us and vice versa. I'd always walk him back to his own yard because I was scared to death he'd be hit by a car. Not that his neglectful, nasty owners ever appreciated this, mind you. Tim had gastro issues and had trouble controlling his bowels, poor old guy, which were very loose. Because he frequently visited us, he would often lose control and leave a huge pile of doggy diarrhea smack dab in the walkway, right in front of our steps, which inevitably would lead to either me or my kids accidentally stepping in it on the way out, which caused a few incidents of either my kids being late to school or me being late getting off to work. To be clear, I never got angry at the poor pup, it wasn't his fault. Each and every time I'd speak to the neighbors requesting that they please keep Tim on their property. To prevent this from happening, They had a large fenced-in yard, no less. Tim got out because the gate was frequently left open. Either the old lady would scream at me or the son would laugh and make very rude remarks. You PettyRevenge. The next time I found yet another huge pile of dog poop in front of the steps. I didn't bother saying anything to the neighbors. I merely picked it up with a shovel, walked over to the neighbor's house when they weren't home, and proceeded to deposit the poop not just in the same spot there, but took it a step further and dumped it right in front of their door. I did this 3 times. I could hear the glorious screams of surprise and disgust from both the old lady and her son from my house. Now, before anyone says anything, I anticipated them possibly taking it out on poor Tim, and already being concerned about the neglect. I had already contacted a friend who was a consulting vet for our local animal rescue and shelter, alerting them of the situation. They told me document and take photos and videos, which I did. Anyway, the neighbors finally realized it was me that was gifting them back the dog poop. The old lady showed up at my front door, and boy was she livid. I kept my video camera on the table in front of the open window closet to my front door, pointing towards the front steps, in anticipation of this happening so I could record it if she didn't respond. Screaming and cursing ensued on her part. Well, I calmly responded and requested she leave the property, or I'd call the police. She didn't and continued to insult and threaten me and my kids. Let me add that while this was going on, Tim was loose. Okay then. Called the police, and my vet friend both showed up within about 30 minutes. I proceeded to show them what I just recorded, plus poor Tim was crying on the neighbor's front steps to be let in. This broke my heart, and the neighbors refused. Police and vet friend decided Tim needed to be rescued. The police officer went over to inform the neighbors while my vet friend leashed Tim, who'd came over to me in my front yard looking for comfort, and walked him over to the shelter's van. The old lady didn't know she was being recorded during her tantrum and tried to accuse me of harassing her and trying to steal her dog. She turned pure white and was, for once, speechless when the officer informed her there was video evidence and she could be charged for her threats against minor children and animal neglect. I agreed not to press charges in exchange for her willingly surrendering Tim, and never again even thinking of ever saying another word to me or my kids, and staying off of our property. She agreed. Tim was adopted by a wonderful older retired gentleman who got him the vet care he needed and started him on a special diet. He went on to live his best life. As for the neighbors, it turns out the son had an arrest warrant out for him, and he just happened to be arrested when he showed up at the house while the police officer was still there, giving them a rant about harassment. The old lady ended up selling her house 6 months later because Sonny Boy was in jail and she couldn't afford to keep the house. I ended up buying a rental, and my new neighbors became very good friends. By the way, I didn't have any fears about possible violent retribution from the neighbor's son. His charges weren't violent in nature, and he was a huge coward, and was aware I was a trained weaponry and physical defense expert, and he left the state after his prison stint. I later hear he died from alcoholism about 10 years later. He'd abandoned his mother, who ended up in a state-funded nursing home. Thanks for listening. 3. My wife, 22 years old, and myself, also 22, got my little sister, 12 years old, some semi-permanent red hair dye for Christmas. She really wanted it and was very excited to use it on herself and her cousins. The hair dye is bright red, assuming you're light blonde or bleached, but Sis has dark brunette hair, so the dye becomes a dark burgundy on her. Everything that follows is what she told me. I wasn't there for any of it. Sis brought the hair dye to a family Christmas at Grandma's so she could share it with our plethora of cousins. One of our cousins, Anna, 16, is pretty entitled. She is a compulsive liar and manipulator. I keep my audio recording app handy on my phone when I'm around her should I have to use it, because I don't trust her. She has also done some mild bullying and taking advantage of Sis in the past year or two. Anna asked Sis to have her hair dyed. Anna obviously has had her hair bleached to a medium light or light blonde. Sis asked Anna, "Is your hair bleached or dyed? If it is, then it's going to turn out really bright and look crazy." Anna said, "No, this is my natural hair color." This is where the malicious compliance comes in. Sis and my other cousins share a knowing look before getting to work. After they let the paste sit for a reasonable amount of time, they wash it out. Instead of pretty mauve accents like in Sis's hair, the back of Anna's hair looks like a bright, clowny, patchy mashup. Anna's response, I kid you not, was to look surprised and say, "Oh yeah, I did bleach my hair. I totally forgot this wasn't my natural color." At this moment, Anna's mother came in and was not happy. Anna wanted to take even more dye from my sister to try to even out the clown hair she had given herself, but Anna's mom stood up for my sister and wouldn't let her take more. This dye is only semi-permanent, but it will still take 10 to 15 shampoos to be fully washed out. I only learned all of this because I took my sister out on a breakfast date after New Year's. I was worried Anna had bullied her into using as much hair dye as she did. When I asked about it, it turns out Sis just wanted to let Anna pay for her obvious lie. And just to clear up a few points you might be wondering, I have never recorded any video or audio of any interaction I have had with Anna. In fact, I don't even see her that much, I mostly avoid her. Yes, there is trauma in her life, no, I don't blame her for that. I'm simply keeping the option of recording conversations, in a one-party consent state, in the back of my mind in case things were to ever get sketchy. She is better than she used to be, but I'm not going to take any chances. I've had male friends get falsely accused of things by crazy women that wanted to ruin them, and the only reason it didn't stick and ruin his life is because the girl kept telling different lies to different people. I'm not going to let a compulsive liar ruin my life with something untrue. It was actually my parents who told me to start being wary, so I'm just taking their advice. The dye is L'Oreal Colorista Semi-Permanent. It is a big tube of dye paste that you put on the hair for a time and then wash off. My sister and cousins were doing short streaks on the ends and undercuts of each other's hair, hence why it was able to last through multiple people and multiple applications. All kids were dyeing their hair, had their parents' permission to do so. 4. Here is a story of how our CEO, who I admire and respect, became CEO. He had been SVP for a few years now, and the owner of the company wanted him to take over as CEO, as the owner was going to retire, and the company was going to transition into more of a corporate governing structure. Some of this had already been completed, like they had a board of directors, etc. The debate over who would be the CEO came down to two people. John. He was hired by this company straight out of college when he was 21. He grew from the bottom up. He had worked in basically every department, led every department, and understood the company inside and out. Alex came into the company as a VP. He has an MBA and experience in the industry. He was the second favorite to become CEO. In an early discussion, the board apparently wanted to vote on who would become the interim CEO before the owner retired. They wanted this to be an 18-month run-up, as taking over was considered a big deal. Alex knew John was the primary contender and had him beat out by a few votes, so Alex brought up the fact that in the company bylaws, it stated the executive officers, CEO, CTO, CIO, and CFO, all had to have college degrees, and therefore John wasn't qualified. This caused the meeting to come to an end. I believe at this point Alex felt he had John beat, so John went to the owner and had a conversation. At the next meeting, the CEO stated he intended on going 1 year longer. The board was shocked, but nothing said the CEO had to retire when he said he would. That's when John went into action. You see, John had 90 college credits. His brother was also the assistant dean at the local community college. John was an English major when his company hired him 35 years prior. The local community college quickly admitted John as a senior into their English Lit major. Due to John's 35 years of business, 3 required business classes were given to him. John also loved math. He cleaped his final math class. This gave John 102 credits, 18 credits shy. So John enrolled in the 12 credits for the spring semester. He completed those and finished up his last 6 credits in the 8-week summer semester. In the third quarter meeting, the CEO announced he was prepared to allow the board to vote on his replacement come the fourth quarter meeting. The CEO made it clear he considered the two frontrunners, John and Alex. Alex brought up the fact that John needed a degree. John smiled, reached into his briefcase, and pulled out his diploma from the community college, clearly showing he graduated with honors with a major in English Lit. In the fourth quarter board meeting, John won by a landslide to become the next CEO. 5. This happened a couple of years ago. I rent an apartment in a duplex. The lease says no smoking inside, which isn't a problem for me. But smoking outside does lead to 2 problems. One being the mosquitoes, the other being my neighbor, Karen. When I first moved in, Karen came right up to me as I was moving boxes and followed me around to ask me questions and lay down the rules of the neighborhood, as if she's the homeowners association. She told me that fire pits and bonfires aren't allowed, because the street has had a gas leak before. It's actually a city ordinance that nobody really listens to. Anyway, at first I thought the questions was just a friendly neighbor getting to know me. But it quickly felt like an interrogation. Where are you coming from? Where do you work? Wife, kids, family in the area? It was just one question after the other. Then she started telling me about everyone in the neighborhood too. That was enough for me not to like her. If she's telling me, basically a stranger, all the details she can think of everyone around us, then nothing I tell her would ever be private. Anyways, I just kept my head down and kept conversations kind of limited whenever I saw her. I was never mean or cold to her, but definitely not as friendly as I could have been. But a few months go by, and summer starts to pick up, as do the mosquitoes in my area. At first I tried sprays, but they don't work great at repelling. Then I tried citronella candles, but because I would blow them out when I was done smoking, the wax wouldn't melt evenly, and I would waste a lot. So I landed on tiki torches. I bought a glass tabletop tiki torch set to set it up on the brick patio near my bench, and it worked great for an hour or so. So I'm sitting on my bench when I hear fire truck sirens. I live near a fire station, so that's not unusual, until they turn down my street. I'm watching as they pull up to my house. It's a narrow street, so my first thought was that my car and my neighbor across the street were parked in a way blocking them from going down the street. So I run inside to grab my keys and dash to my car, but right as I'm at the sidewalk, half a dozen firefighters rush by me to my front yard to the tiki torch. I have no clue what's going on, and with the sirens going, I can't hear them. One of them leans up close to me and yells in my ear, "What is that?" "A tiki torch," I reply, still confused. "What are you burning?" "It's a tiki torch," I repeated, exasperated and confused. A few of them go back and turn off the siren and tell me one of my neighbors must hate me. They were called for an out-of-control fire pit. What they saw was a tiki torch with no flammable material around it, being watched by an adult. They said it's fine to have a tiki torch and went on their way. Now imagine my surprise when the very next day I'm on my porch, tiki torch going, and I hear sirens again. I think, it can't be me, but lo and behold, they turn down my street. I calmly cap the torch and wait for them. And now they were mad. They didn't know who called because they were dispatched by 911, but they told me if it happens again, they were going to file misuse of emergency service charges against whoever. Now I'm annoyed too. I'm not in the wrong. This one neighbor doesn't like me because I don't like her. Literally all my neighbors who've met me wave to me. We move each other's packages to a more hidden place on porches, help shovel driveways. I'm invited to multiple barbecues every summer, and we still manage to stay out of each other's business. Not her. So, my PettyRevenge plan came almost immediately. I went back to the grocery store. I bought the tiki torch a few days earlier and cleaned them out. I bought 8 and tons of citronella oil. I think the stockpile of citronella I have is more of a fire hazard than an actual fire pit. But yeah, I have handed them out to all the neighbors in view of Karen, and explained why I'm giving it, and if they ever need the fluid to just text me. They all thought it was hilarious, so within the coming months my neighbors had the tiki torches proudly displayed on their porches whenever they had company over. They raised the torches and cheered me from across the street with a grin. Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to Revenge is Ice Cream, episode 237. And thank you very much to everybody who allowed me to use their stories in this video. Please pop a like before you go, thank you kindly. Right, no other business today, so let's move right along to Hellfreezer's question of the day. And this one goes thanks to my mod Shigar. If you could make people forget how to do something in the world and they never remembered it existed, what would it be? And I'm going to pick one that's slightly serious but also sort of fun, because I don't like self-service food items in stores. I.e., I don't want them to put all the bread or the cakes, whatever, on a place where the public can come along, pick them up, and bag them up themselves. I don't like that because for every person that practices good hygiene, I think we all know there's a lot of people that don't. Whereas if they were made freshly in store and then bagged up by the staff, taking proper hygiene precautions, washing their hands frequently, that sort of thing, that would be fine with me. But people can be pretty nasty. So, I would like people to forget that that's possibly a thing, so that all the tasty baked goods in stores would be pre-bagged and I can just pick up the package and buy it. Because right now, if the public has access to it, I just don't touch it. But you might have more fun and relaxed ideas, so please do let me know in a comment below. Okay, and with that, I'm going to head off for now. So until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourselves.